What is going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you did not get a chance to check out the very first ever Pack a Day podcast live, it is recorded, so make sure you go and check that out. Two phenomenal guests in Aaron Nagler and Ben Fennell. Just a ton of fun talking Packers football. You know, a little bit of a bummer that we had to discuss such a brutal loss at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings in week one, where Green Bay just frankly didn't play that well. But we tried to go over some positives. We went over some things that Green Bay is going to have to improve. You know, try to diagnose some of the issues that happened and, you know, where Green Bay can kind of go from there, specifically this week against the Chicago Bears. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. Today's episode probably going to be a little bit shorter. I always say that it's going to probably go 25 minutes anyway, but I think we'll keep it short today. We're going to go over my grades from this past week. If you want to check out the full grades, make sure to check them out at packerreport.com. The first week is always free. After that, usually it is going to be behind the paywall, so you'll have to get a packerreport.com subscription, which covers all 24/7 sports, and I think there's a bunch of promotions that go on with that. So either way, definitely worthwhile. You get the great Mark Eckel and some of his articles, Ross Uglum, Zach Jacobson, Dusty Evely. It's just a really great crew of people. So make sure you're checking out packerreport.com if you're not already. But first article is up there with the full grades from week one, so you can check that out. Really quickly, before we get to main topic, if you've been enjoying the live happy hour last Friday or, you know, Pack a Day live on Tuesday, that is going to continue. And super excited to let you know that this Friday is going to be happy hour with special guests Janelle Mackey, Paul Brettel, and Andrew Merteg. So make sure to check that out. And then next Tuesday, Pack a Day Live, 7 p.m. Central, is going to be Wes Hodkiewicz and Tom Grassi. So that should be an absolutely epic show that you do not want to miss. Again, next Tuesday here on YouTube, 7 p.m. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Before we get to grades, we did have a couple pieces of news from Tuesday. The first is that Green Bay did not just elevate Caleb Jones from the practice squad as like a 1 week elevation. They signed him to the active roster. And, you know, there was initial buzz all the way around, right? So it's like, okay, they're going to end up cutting Jake Hansen or Royce Newman, or they're going to get one of those guys that played poorly this past week. And then there was the, oh my goodness, they're going to put David Bakhtiari on IR and this is it. And he's going to be done. I tweeted out immediately, more likely this was the fact that they were probably worried that he was going to get signed by another team, or that they had already, you know, Caleb Jones had received word from another team that they wanted to sign him, and he went back to the Packers first and said, hey, I've got an offer. Do you want to add me to the active roster? All those different things can happen, but it was reported that, in fact, the Packers were concerned that he was going to get signed by another team. There were a couple teams that had quite a few offensive line injuries this past week. So Green Bay was concerned that they were going to lose him to another 53-man roster. So with Chris Barnes going on IR, which was the corresponding move, they simply added him to the active roster. Now, there was some discussion and buzz of saying like, well, I mean, come on, you can't keep 11 offensive linemen on the roster, to which, if you've been listening to me at all, I say, why not? That there's no reason you can't do that. Keep your best 53 that you want to keep on the roster, that you think could potentially get claimed by other teams, and you have a full 16-man practice squad that you can call guys up at other positions if you need to. You know, it's not like Green Bay lost last week because they didn't have a third running back on their active roster. Heck, Amari Rodgers couldn't even get in the game, you know, so I don't think there's any level of concern. You have to deactivate 5 guys anyway every single week. You have to, you know, activate 8 offensive linemen. If 3 of your inactives are offensive linemen, and you know you still have to deactivate 2 other people. If you activate people from the practice squad, you have to deactivate 7 players. So does it really matter that 3 of them are offensive linemen? In my opinion, no. And I'm very happy to see Caleb Jones back. I know, you know, Ben Fennell, if you saw Pack a Day Live mention that, you know, doesn't think that Caleb Jones has a chance to be a long-term NFL offensive lineman. There's definitely concerns in his game, just the size, you know, leverage, pad level, you know, agility, all those sort of things are going to be interesting as his career goes along. But he had a very good training camp, a very good preseason, and I do think there's some developmental upside there that I'm at minimum intrigued by. So personally, very happy to see him on the active roster and not get signed by another team. So that is official. As of Tuesday, he is on the active roster. Again, Chris Barnes goes to IR. Here's my question for you, and I'm legitimately curious your thoughts. Let's say let's say that John Runyon Jr., David Bakhtiari, and Elton Jenkins cannot go this week. All right. Let's say they're not available. So in all likelihood, you're going once again from left to right, with Josh Nyman, Zach Tom, and then Josh Myers, Jake Hansen, Royce Newman. More on that in a second, because I know people are already going to be upset about that. But let's say that that's your starting five going into this week. And let's say somebody goes down. Let's say the position doesn't matter and they just want to bring up the next best guy and put them on the offensive line. So take position out of it entirely. Who do you think would be that next guy up? There's only three options, right? Rasheed Walker, Sean Ryan, and now Caleb Jones. Who do you think they would put in on the offensive line? I legitimately don't know. I don't know. I literally have no idea. I don't think it would be Sean Ryan. I think he's actually looked the worst of the three. Maybe position matters, and maybe if it's they need a left tackle, they go Walker Jones. Maybe if it's a guard, they go Ryan. If it's I don't know, because Zach Tom can play everywhere, right? So they have some versatility there. So I legitimately don't know where they go in that situation. If they were to go with their starting five and one of them got hurt, you could tell me Sean Ryan, Rasheed Walker, or Caleb Jones went in, and I would not be shocked. I actually think it might be Caleb Jones. It could be Rasheed Walker too, but I don't know. It's a really interesting one. So back to the whole Jake Hansen thing, right? Because immediately Caleb Jones gets elevated and everyone on Twitter is like, got to cut Jake Hansen, got to cut Jake Hansen. You are going into a game this week against Chicago where you are almost assuredly, without, well, I don't want to say that, but it's leaning towards David Bakhtiari not playing. That's what was reported by Ryan Wood last week, that he's unlikely to play this week. Elton Jenkins, either, probably not playing, but if he plays, maybe he's on a snap count, or maybe you're extra cautious with him. A lot of different things could happen. And then John Runyon Jr. is still in concussion protocol at this moment, which you never know how long that's going to go. So if you thought that with Bakhtiari and Jenkins and John Runyon Jr., all with some current injury concerns, that they're going to go out and just release Jake Hansen going into this week, you are crazy. There's 0% chance. He started last week. Whether he should or shouldn't have, we can talk about all day. But at minimum, he's going to be their next, guy off the offensive line, and is still going to provide depth for this team, and is still going to be ahead of guys like Rasheed Walker, Caleb Jones, and Sean Ryan at this point. So, yeah, there's 0 chance, especially with how banged up they are on the offensive line right now. Even though they have 11 guys on the active roster, they are not just going to release Jake Hansen and, go in a different direction at this point. So very much expect Jake Hansen to be on the roster through this week. Maybe when they get completely healthy and Jenkins and Bakhtiari and John Runyon Jr. are back, now that they've got 11 offensive line, it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden Jake Hansen was the odd man out. It would surprise me, but they've gone that route before with guys like Ben Braden, where at one point they were working with the starters and then they release them and just bring them back on the practice squad. So I think that's within the realm of possibility when everyone's healthy. Again, would be pretty surprised if that happened. But, right now they're just not healthy enough to make that sort of move. So don't expect any additional offensive line moves until they get fully healthy. Other good news is it sounds like Keyshawn Nixon also avoided a long-term injury and will be back at least sooner rather than later. There was no timetable given, but that was reported by Tom Silverstein of PackersNews.com. So when we saw that Chris Barnes went out with what looked like a serious issue, Nixon had what looked like a bad shoulder injury, Walker, we didn't know what the shoulder, John Runyon Jr. goes down. It sounds like overall Green Bay avoided anything catastrophic with any of the injuries, and all should be back probably sooner rather than later. Barnes goes on IR, so at least 4 weeks, but doesn't sound like any of these are going to be long-term injuries. Now, which players are available this week, we have yet to know, and we will remain to be seen. But overall, still good news with those 4 injuries, and that none of them look to be long-term at this point. All right, let's go over some grades really quick. Check out the full article over on PackerReport.com. But 3 highest graded players on offense this week, just full out, there weren't very many good grades on offense this week, as you probably could imagine. The number 2 and number 3, actually, I guess tied for number 2, was Aaron Jones and Mercedes Lewis. Mercedes Lewis was not involved in the passing game at all as a receiver. He did not go out for a route. He was basically a 6th offensive lineman all day. And that's what he is at this point, is a 6th offensive lineman. the good news is he's still very good at it. A couple missed blocks by Mercedes Lewis in this game, a little bit uncharacteristic, but multiple, and I mean multiple occasions where he's going up one-on-one with a edge rusher, as has been the case throughout his time in Green Bay, and he just shuts them down. And that is such a rare trait for a tight end to be able to do, and he just does it with ease at times, and we saw that again in this game. Aaron Jones, couple misplays here or there where I thought maybe he could have made a different read, but overall, hard running. That one really big explosive run was definitely one of the Packers' plays of the day, especially on offense. So another tough day of running when it came to like blocking up on front of the offensive line, but Jones made the most of it, ran hard, and I thought he had a good day overall. And then number one on offense, A.J. Dillon, a plus, I think, 0.75 grade, I think it was. I don't have the actual grades in front of me here, but a really good grade for A.J. Dillon. I thought, his play throughout the course of the day, he ran incredibly hard. There's the one play where he gets jammed at the line and just gets so low and lowers his pads and keeps churning his legs and pumps out, additional 7-8 yards on the play. Caught the ball well out of the backfield. And we've discussed already how much better the offense was when they were targeting Jones and Dillon. Well, shouldn't come as a huge surprise that Jones and Dillon were the top two players on offense this week. Again, the only other player that really had any real positive was Mercedes Lewis. So not a lot of positives to take away. On the flip side, three lowest graded Packers on offense: Christian Watson, Royce Newman, and Jake Hansen. So, great discussion here on Christian Watson, because if you take away the first play of the game and just watch the rest of his tape, pretty good. I would say like an average day, maybe even a slight positive grade, at least in the realm, right? I thought he had some really good blocking. I thought he still showed some explosiveness. Didn't get a ton of targets. He had the nice reverse or end around. I forget which one it was. He had, he had a reception, for 8 or 9 yards. Didn't do too much of, anything from a receiving standpoint the rest of the game. But I thought overall he looked good. There was no major flaws in his game after that. A couple routes maybe he could have run a little bit more crisp, but overall he had an okay day. But that first drop is as bad as it gets, right? That is, and let me start by saying he gets credit for smoking Patrick Peterson on that play. There's no two ways about it. The route and how he ran that route and just getting by Peterson and getting separation, he gets credit for that. That was a fantastic route. He gets credit for his blocking through the remainder of the game. All that stuff graded in the positive. But that drop was as bad as it gets for a play. Aaron Rodgers handed it to him basically, 40, 50 yards downfield. He's got a walk-in touchdown, and he just concentrates, it's a concentration drop. And he takes his eye off the ball, and it's a drop. It's a huge play in the game. It hurt the team psychologically. It takes 7 points off the board, and it's basically a turnover. They don't get anything after that. I know that they still could have drove down and scored. It wasn't like it was a third or fourth down or anything like that, but ultimately, that took 7 points off the board and is basically like a turnover-worthy play. A massive, massive play in the game, and I don't know what you do on that play besides give it a massive negative. Like that changed the entire course of the game. If you're saying that the best score that you can get on a play is a plus 2.0 and the worst is a negative 2.0, outside of like the game being on the line, like let's say that was Packers down by 5, last play of the game, and that same play happens and Watson drops it, like that's a negative 2.0. Not that I want to bring this up or even discuss it, but a certain onside kick recovery in an NFC championship game that didn't go right, that's a negative 2.0. That's as bad as it gets. I might have even broke my scale to give that specific play even harsher negative grade. But like outside of game on the line or like a playoff-esque play, like that's as bad of a play as it gets. That's a lost 7 points. And again, I gave him credit. I didn't give him a negative 2.0 because I thought he ran a fantastic route. He showed explosiveness. He did everything right up until that point. But that is still a massive negative in that game. And that's why ultimately he graded out as my lowest graded offensive player. It's just really tough to come back from that. Like you have to have probably a couple touchdowns, 8 receptions, 100 plus yards, and really, to start making up for that play. And he didn't get a ton of opportunity. So it is what it is. But overall, it's going to be tough to make up for that sort of play. Royce Newman, I thought was, as much as Jake Hansen struggled, I thought Royce Newman was right there, or in my case, I actually had him worse. I didn't think he did much at right tackle to hold up at the point of attack. He didn't get anything going in the run game, whereas Jake Hansen actually had some good run blocks. Newman, I didn't think did. And I just thought both of those guys, right side of the offensive line, just absolutely abysmal. Could not run block, could not pass protect. Like I said, Hansen had a couple plays in run block that were fine, but overall, really, really bad play for the offensive line. Outside of those three, Watson, Newman, and Hansen, I had like what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other players grade pretty strongly in the negative, including Aaron Rodgers, Zach Tom, Yash Nyman, John Runyon Jr., Robert Tonyan, and Tyler Davis. Not great blocking, not great anything. And again, very few people who graded in the positive, Dillon, Jones, and Lewis, really three of the only ones. There were a couple small positives outside of that, but just a really, really tough game for the offense. Defensively, man, I love Kenny Clark, and he showed up, and he was the MVP of this game by such a wide margin. I can't even explain it. Like, he was so dominant inside. He owns Garrett Bradbury. Ed Ingram, the rookie, got baptized by Kenny Clark on a couple different occasions. There's a play where Clark comes up, and I think it's Ingram. I could be reversing the two, but I think Ingram comes at him first, and he throws Ingram to the side, and then Bradbury comes up, and he gets right past Bradbury. Like, he basically won 2 one-on-ones on the same exact play. He was completely disruptive. He looked much more spry, not much more, but he looked more spry than he has in years past. He was a force to be reckoned with on the inside. Phenomenal game by Kenny Clark. Easy game ball, easy MVP of the game. Cannot say enough positives. He was all over the place. And just go back and if you, I know this is not a fun game to go back and rewatch, but if you need to or if you want to, just watch Kenny Clark. It's really the only big takeaway from this game, and it's definitely worth watching. Quay Walker was number 2. Definitely a couple plays in coverage that Quay would like to have back. You're going to see him diagnose things. It's going to take him, some time to just settle in. That's a lot of space in the second level of the field that he and Devondre Campbell have to cover, right? And with that space is going to come opportunities to overthink things and to make mistakes. And when you're a rookie in this league, those mistakes are going to come. And we saw a few of those from Quay Walker on Sunday, but we also saw a player who flew to the football, who hit extremely hard. I thought hardest hitting linebacker that I think Green Bay's had probably since Desmond Bishop. We saw him rally to the football. We saw his speed. We saw his athleticism. We saw his ability to shed blocks in this game. I think that's going to continue to improve. And as the game slows down for him, look the heck out. Because if that's the first impression, as he's still thinking through things, man, the game's only going to get slower and slower for him as time goes on. I think Green Bay has an absolute stud on their hands long term. Going to be growing pains, no question about it. There always is for rookie linebackers. But man, I'm telling you right now, be extremely excited for year 2, year 3, year 4, Quay Walker. That dude is going to be very, very, very good on the second level. And then I actually had a slight positive grade on Dean Lowry as my third player. Couple plays early in the game. And this is just like a thing with Dean Lowry where he doesn't start great and then he settles into the game. I thought early he struggled, and then as the game slowed down, he started to get a little bit more physical, start throwing some guys in the backfield a little bit. I thought he sort of reset the line of scrimmage a couple times. Okay, not great game from Dean Lowry, but still good enough in this specific game to be the third highest graded player. The lowest graded players on defense, Adrian Amos, by far and away the lowest graded Packer, by far and away his lowest graded game that I've ever graded of him. I actually graded his last game in Chicago, or his last season in Chicago too. Nothing came close to this. I thought he was poor in coverage. Inexplicably came up on that play on the deep ball to Justin Jefferson. On the other deep ball where there was the miscommunication between Rasul Douglas and Jair Alexander, he has the ability to tackle Jefferson before the end zone and doesn't make the play and kind of completely misses on the tackle. Like, just totally uncharacteristic play from Adrian Amos. I would be shocked if he has another game like that in his career in Green Bay, or certainly this season. He'll get that cleaned up. I have no doubt. He's the most consistent, reliable player that I think is on the entire Packers team. And that was just a super anomaly of a game that I don't think anyone saw coming. Eric Stokes, thought he had a couple of good plays in coverage, but there were a few really not great plays in coverage. And then he had also on the same play where Amos missed the tackle, like Stokes is just like walking to the pylon basically to try to make a play on Justin Jefferson, and then just gets there late, doesn't have a chance. Like, there were a couple plays like that from Stokes where he's just like, it needs to be better, need to have a little bit more hustle, and I didn't see that from Stokes. Combine that with a couple, completions given up, and it just overall not a great day from Stokes. And then number 3, I don't get the Jonathan Garvin thing. Like, he was my lowest graded player a season ago. He showed nothing at edge rusher this year. Like, Enigbare was a significant step ahead of Jonathan Garvin in this game. In fact, Enigbare graded in the positive. Garvin, third lowest graded player. And I just don't get it at this point. I would like to see them go in a different direction, try some different things. I'd rather have Tipa in there. I'd rather have Ladarius Hamilton. Garvin showed a few flashes in training camp, but man, the tape has just not been good enough for him. And to me, there's better players out there, and I think Green Bay needs to make a change at that spot. Jair Alexander, also a negative grade, negative 0.5 this week, which is a super rare thing for him as well. And when you have a game where Aaron Rodgers grades in the negative, Rashawn Gary was a neutral, Devondre Campbell was a slight negative, Jair Alexander was a negative, Adrian Amos was a big negative. When you have your studs that are grading in, like those 5 guys combined, negative 3.15, you don't have Bakhtiari, you don't have Lazard, you don't have Jenkins, and you've only got, I don't know what, really 2 players that graded very well in Kenny Clark and AJ Dillon. Like, it's just not going to be good enough, and they need their stars and their better players to perform. And in this case, they didn't, and they lost the game in embarrassing fashion. So stars need to play better, and I think they will, and I think it will not be as big of an issue moving forward, and hopefully they have a get-right game against the Bears this upcoming Sunday. See, I told you, even when I want to go short, I can't shut up, and I still go 20-plus minutes, so I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I always love going through my grades each week. Check them out at PackerReport.com. Make sure to subscribe here on the YouTube channel. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.